passionate about it, but at the same time be very willing to prepare hard for it, focusing on the next step, but also on the bigger picture. Time is oxygen. One lesson you learn from an expedition like Everest is to not be scared of scale. They have taken up some challenges which don't feel too comfortable. So everybody in that sense is already climbing their own Everest.
Welcome to Barriers to Break Beyond Business. Have you ever wondered what it takes for somebody to scale up and summit Mount Everest? Have you ever wondered if by doing that, there are a lot of lessons that one can apply to business and life? On today's episode, we have Mr. Aditya Gupta, who's the CEO of Sharda Exports, the Rug Republic, and the Furniture Republic. Sharda Export is into the business of home fashion. This business was started in 1983, and Aditya has a lot to share with all of you. And you might want to go grab a coat or something because it is going to get a little cold on this podcast. And he takes us on this wonderful adventure as he scales up the mighty Everest. And he shares with you the lessons that this mountain has taught him. He's also an author and a TEDx speaker, and I can't wait to get started on this podcast with him. This is Barriers to Break Beyond Business with Mr. Aditya Gupta from Sharda Export. Let's get started. Hello, Mr. Aditya Gupta. It's wonderful to have you here today on this podcast, and I can't wait to get started with my questions because I feel you will really take us on an adventure today, and I'm sure everybody's going to find out why in a couple of minutes. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Gagan. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to talk to you too.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So, if you could just take us back a few years and help us understand how it all started for you. I think you started from Meerut. You were born in Meerut, and the business took off in 1983, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, the business was started. So our parents started manufacturing rugs in our family home in 1983-84, and then the export business was started off in 91, 92 after me and my brother sort of joined, and we have done with college education. And in the meanwhile, our parents had done the hard work of setting something up, getting started, sowing the seed in the ground to get a product going, to get basic manufacturing understanding. But Meerut is not a location for rug production. So typically it was Panipat and Varanasi and Bhadoi and all of that area. So they did the hard work of getting started, and then we were blessed with good education and then a starting point. So we took it from there. So thanks to them, and then we took the baton from there.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. And so, around, I mean, what age group were you at when they started the business, and how did it like affect?
I was in class 10, and the factory was, I mean, our family home was a large compound where we had our family business was cold storages and ice factory, so we had a cold storage. And the first looms of rugs were put in the garage that we had, and the cow shed. So the cows were sort of let out in another spot, and the shed was used to put up some carpet looms. That was the first three looms in our family home, which are still there. The home we moved to other homes in the meanwhile, but that place is still owned by us, and it's, if you go there, you can still see the iron rings on the ground where the cows were actually tied.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, how does it feel growing up in an environment like that? And did you ever think that you will be part of the business, or did you like starting off? Did you think, no, this is not for me. I want to explore something different. How did that whole story come about?
So that is true. In the beginning, the businesses are very small, and you don't feel. And I was at University of Roorkee, which is now IIT Roorkee, and then I was at FMS Delhi. So I had decent sort of job prospects in terms of just the hot jobs at that time, and even today, multinational companies, multinational banks, whatever. And the business was quite small. So this was a conversation that I was having one night with my mom, and I think she said a few things to me that night, and she said that you have to be a. I was telling her that I'm thinking of taking up this job. American Express was on offer, Tata's was on offer. So she was like, "Oh, you have to be a job giver, not a job taker. So think about it. But anyway, you do what you want to do." So, and I think what happens is that because we are a business family, basically, even if the business was small and it wasn't doing that great at that time, and still some bit of that presumed entrepreneurship is there. So you have to admit to that. It's not, I can't take credit for that. That is just in your environment, and you've seen it all along. And job prospects, I'm talking about early 90s, as compared to even the multinational companies, salaries were quite small, compared to what you thought you could do in a business situation, even if it wasn't that great to begin with. Plus, of course, the whole idea of being from a business family, you want to do something around business. You're more comfortable with that idea.
Got it. Got it. And so the whole manufacturing and everything is set up in Meerut even now, or you've moved base?
Even now, the head office and the main factories are in Meerut, although we do have a footprint in Varanasi, in Panipat area,
Mhm.
because as the business scales up, you need to be in the core production areas also. That helps us to create more updated products. It helps us to give a lot more production capacity, a lot more agility in responding to, sometimes if an article is doing well, the numbers that the clients want can really spike up.
Okay. And starting from Meerut, of course, I think you did attend a couple of trade shows like Domotex, I think in 1992. If you could just take us through that
Yep.
experience of, going there and representing India on the global scale. And what are the kind of things you saw? I mean, what really helped you open up in a lot of ways and understand that, this is a business that I want to be in and this is a business that I want to kind of grow into. So if you could just throw some light on that.
See, the thing is that the rug business was carpet business in India was always an export oriented business. Domestic market much smaller. And we were in the initial years, so after they started making in 83, 84, doing some local jobs. But in the last couple of years, between let's say 86, 87 up to 1991, our parents were supplying to other exporters who were based in Delhi, and the business was clearly export oriented. So the export line was the line to take in this case. 1992 January, Domotex in Hanover, the global trade fair for floor coverings, was the first time anybody from our whole clan had actually ever gone abroad. So the first place I ever traveled to was essentially Hanover, Germany. And yes, it was a fascinating experience, for a 22-year-old kid to land up in Germany, and it's a completely different environment. There were only 11 companies from India, I think, that year in the show. And our booth was probably one of the smallest in the trade. So we had a 6 square meter, like a 2 meter by 3 meter space, and we were five rugs to show. And that was it. It was a very, very small and a very cautious start, because the kind of cost it takes to go to Europe and do a trade show for a company who hasn't quite found its feet is quite large. And then you don't know where you're headed, you don't know whether it'll give you any returns or not. And showing five rugs with a tiny booth, like, what are your chances? So yes, it was a starting point, and I think from that you begin to understand a lot more. So I was still at FMS when January. I finished FMS only in summer of '92. So excuse me. So before that, I was actually studying in the university, Delhi University Library, about participating in trade fairs, and I used to go to the into German Chamber of Commerce, and they had some publications around how do you participate in trade fairs in Germany, and I did a few classes in German language in DU
Okay.
to sort of get my way around in Germany, which were helpful. At least you could talk directions and numbers, and in Germany, especially if you're talking to somebody on the street, or even now, let's say between '92 and now 30 years, things have changed, but it was harder uh, to communicate only in English in Germany at that time.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, from a family business, family run business, taking it from 0 to 5 and now 5 to 500, what are the kind of challenges, or I would call them milestones, that you saw and you've achieved over the years? I think now, if I'm not wrong, you're supplying to more than 85 countries around the world.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the milestones that you feel are worthy of talking about?
Well, I would say, like, look, there is an organic nature of this growth because it hasn't happened overnight. It's not like some cases you were one today and 200 like next week or something. It was not like that. So it is an organic story. But yes, being out of town, not being very well funded or something, is like your own. Basically, you're working on your reserves and surplus. So you have to keep generating money as you go along. So yes, there is a step-by-step approach to that thing, and some of it is to do with serendipity. Some of it is to do with a lot of effort. Sometimes opportunities come in waves. It's not like everything is not a gradual. So on a longer term view basis, it looks like gradual, but there are periods where all of a sudden there is a leap to be made. So you have an X production capacity, and suddenly in the next 3 months, if you can't make it 4x, then you will not be able to continue with this client or that business or something like that. So all of those things, but I would not say that it is anything extremely, unique or extraordinary. It is more about consistency, and it's more about chipping away at the mountain. Most of the business stories, I think, are a question of commitment to the step-by-step approach and not expecting magic overnight. Some of those things, especially in the traditional businesses and the usual sort of brick and mortar kind of businesses, things don't happen overnight. So you have to be at the job, and you have to be very consistent in your effort and be satisfied with growing step by step. And I think that's what our story has been. And eventually, one thing leads to the other. So I always say, like, I'm a mountain climber. So as you keep going up, the views keeps changing, and then only you know that view, and then only you can appreciate that view. Standing at the bottom of the mountain, you can keep imagining about other views, but you don't know them. You can't really do anything about them.
Right. So yeah, I mean, since you mentioned mountains and the views, I was holding myself back from asking you. I thought I'll probably get this in a little later, but I think I think I'm going to jump right in. So, sir, I mean, you've scaled Everest, right, in 2019, and
Yep,
you've also gotten a book out. I think the proceeds from the book going to Cry Foundation, and
that's right.
I did go online and do some research about the book, and I did get a few images, and I'm sure I'll get to see more of them soon. So, if you could just
Sure.
help us understand why did you have to summit Everest? Like, what was at the back of your mind? Why did you have to do that?
Well, it's a strange question to answer because I have been involved with adventure trekking, adventure space, adventure activities, trekking and mountain climbing since college. I did my course in mountaineering in 91, 92, even before I graduated from FMS. So you are like in that space, and you have that charm of that space. So eventually Everest becomes the kind of final frontier of that space, right? So let's say if you're a tennis player, you might have the dream to go and play in Wimbledon, which is obviously much harder than going and climbing Everest because you don't have to compete with somebody else to climb Everest. Whereas in Wimbledon, you have to beat many other people to go and sort of even reach that court. So I think it is basically one of those things. But when you are in that space, the whole thing about that space itself is the fact that you love the challenge, you love the experience, you love the ups and downs of the emotions that come with any of these serious adventure activities. I think as a human being and as a business person, it trains you in dealing with those, anxieties, difficulties, and then it gives you the optimism that eventually things work out. So that, I think, is the biggest inherent learning that these activities bring to you. So there are always stages in the game where you think it's very risky, may or may not happen, anything could happen, all of those kind of thoughts. And then you figure out that, once you let those moments pass and you keep doing your job that you have to do, things are not as bad as they seem to be when you're just looking at them from a distance. So once you jump in, and that, I think, has a very important parallel and a lesson to any entrepreneur or anybody who, for that matter, who's trying to build a career, because there are those moments which begin to demoralize you or begin to scare the hell out of you. Or sometimes you look at a thing from a distance, this project is too big, or this idea is too big, or this is not going to happen, and what if I die, what if I lose everything I have. But life usually is kinder than that. I have experienced that. And I think that optimism, that inbuilt optimism, is not something you can buy from the market or read about in a book or watch on a YouTube thing. You have to experience those things and start experiencing smaller events, and then expand the scope of those events, and gradually you see that things actually work out if you keep doing your job. So that's the connect between the two things, and that's how I also got into it. That thrill of going into the wilderness, and the enjoyment that I personally get from nature and these views and these, just the life of adventure activities, adventure trips, long mountain trips. Everest is almost 2 months, so you're camping for 2 months in the middle of nowhere and minus 25 or lower at night. So all of those things give you something in return which you can't simulate and which you can't learn about any other way except by experiencing them.
Got it. So I mean, of course, we don't have 60 days for a summit right now, but in the few minutes that we do have, let's start from base camp, and let's try and draw parallels to businesses as we summit, as we go towards the summit. And yes, of course, I did see the incredible images that you've covered on your way to the summit. And if you could just take us through a couple of things or a couple of anecdotes that you would want to relate, or you've learned from this experience that can be applied to business of sorts. And a follow-up question would be, how does one build that muscle of optimism? Is it through repetition? Is it through experiences? Is it through, I mean, what is it? I mean, how do you?
Well, if I take the last part of your question first, it is a little bit of resistance training, right? So basically, like any muscle building, like any habit building, like anything that you want to grow in, it has to be done step by step. So you start with smaller experiences, and you start with smaller jumps, and then you begin to understand that you can lift 10 kilos today, 12 kilos tomorrow, 20 kilos next month, and maybe 50 kilos next year if you keep going with it. Because if you start with the 50 kilos and you can't even move the damn thing, and then you feel, oh, I can't do this, it's not for me, etc., etc., etc. So Everest is one of those things which you can't be just starting off with Everest and then feel that, oh, I didn't make it happen. In terms of what the lessons are and how there are parallels, I am happy to share that with you, of course, and that is something which I feel I might bring to your listeners a little bit more unique in terms of content. Let me show you. I made a book on Everest called The 7 Lessons from Everest, and this is how the book actually looks like. If you want to see, this is how the cover is. It's a big coffee table book, 250 pages, 400 impressions, 400 illustrations. And this was a book which came about, I think, thanks to COVID, because after I came back from Everest in 2019, and then 2020 and 2021, pretty much the world was kind of locked down in their home. So I had a lot of time to actually work on a book and write down all of those things, even though I had written basic contents and articles earlier. And it is a genuine reflection of what I felt I learned, because the idea eventually, which one has to wrestle with, is that okay, you climbed Everest, but does that help the world? What good is it to anybody else that you climbed Everest? So mountaineering in that sense is a very individual thing. You learn from it. It's not a spectator sport. It's not something which makes you tons of money or something. So it is something which is a very individual. It's almost meditational in some sense, when you are really, it's between you and the mountain, and there is a lot of it which is very personal about it. So trying and bringing it out to be of some use to the world, and then nobody else, or very few other people are really looking to go climb mountains, or at least not Mount Everest. So one has to see what is the relevance of climbing Mount Everest for everybody else. So that's where the whole idea of Everest being only a metaphor for something which is an audacious goal or a challenging goal or almost a scary goal, you know. So Everest is only a metaphor for that. So everybody in that sense is already climbing their own Everest. because they have taken up some challenges which don't feel too comfortable, which don't feel like they will certainly be achieved, which at sometimes, depending on how ambitious some people are, it can sometimes feel like, what if it doesn't work out? What's my plan B? Will I be pushed back in my career? So on and so forth. So I think if I start from what the experience of climbing Everest, and because I have been a business person, and before I went to Everest, I was already a business person for nearly 30 years, from 91, 92 to 2019. So you can, and this has been my observation throughout, not only now, but throughout my adventure activity. There are so many parallels between running a business and going through an adventure trip. The first thing, especially for these big audacious goals, parallel to an Everest, is that you have to be passionate about it, but at the same time be very willing to prepare hard for it. If you don't have either of the two, if you're not willing to prepare, the sacrifices it takes to prepare for something, and the passion has to be more than just the passion of feelings. It has to be something which translates into action, which translates into the discipline of acting upon your passions. So I have been, giving examples of the sports world. For example, a lot of people watch TV on cricket. Watch cricket on TV, and that I'm not sure if it's passion for cricket or it's passion for watching cricket. It's not the same thing. So in the business world, you can't watch business grow on a TV. You have to make it happen. So the day and night toil that it takes. So similarly, so that thing, anything which is large enough will require that preparation, and that preparation is what takes you through. That when you say about optimism doesn't come out of thin air. It comes out of experiences, and it comes out of a certain belief in yourself, which also then comes out of a certain reason. It has to be grounded in reason. You can pretend otherwise, but if in your art of art you already know that you haven't done your job right, or you haven't prepared, you haven't done the needful, then inside your heart you can only have a fake optimism, which will go away pretty quickly once real difficulties begin to show up. But if you know that you have really done your preparation right, and if you know that you've done these things before, and now you've done everything that was supposed to be done, so then your confidence and optimism is a completely different level. So the problems or challenges never get on top of you. You always remain eye to eye with it, and you are always sort of fighting fit in terms of, so that preparation, the result of that preparation is not only in terms of Everest, for example, your physical ability, but it's also the belief in yourself as to what you can handle. What if, all those what if scenarios have a more positive conclusion in your mind when you know your preparation is in place. So therefore that is something which is not about ability only, but it's also about mentality. And the proof of that that discipline, the proof of the fact that you are willing to do those things on a consistent basis, is already the real evidence of that passion actually you have. So if you're not willing to prepare, then the passion is already in question. And therefore, if you're going to take up something which is very audacious in nature, then when the real difficulties show up, then you can't put up a show. You have to really do what needs to be done. So that is the first thing. And in terms of business, I would say the second thing I would say is that one lesson you learn from an expedition like Everest is to not be scared of scale. Because when you look at Everest from a distance, and obviously you have seen stories and movies and all kinds of things, and it's very scary and it's very threatening. But eventually, day by day, you keep climbing over, the mountain, and at some point, you keep, getting nearer and nearer to the goal. And eventually, you are there on the last day, and it's still pretty big in your face. If you see my book, photographs from the last day of the climb are still something which Everest looks very, very intimidating. But eventually, it works out. When you keep chipping away at it, it works out. And that's what that whole thing is, to not be scared of scale, but to be determined to keep doing what needs to be done, and not all the time keep looking at, what is left, how much is left, how is it going to happen. So not being scared of scale is important. These two things are sort of the initial part of, even before you get started on the real project. Once you are out there, then The first thing is obviously the power of focus, to focus on opportunity, focus on, where you can put your step, focus on what needs to be done. Because even at base camp, there are many people. Some people are sick, some people are just negative people. They're just people who talk all the time about, things which can go wrong, or they talk, crap all the time. So that ability to cut out the noise, or cut out the bad signals from your mind, and focus on what needs to be done, and focus on what is the opportunity instead of only the threat. Of course, you have to prepare for the threat, so that's the second part of it. But the first part is that your belief in that opportunity, your belief in that I can do it because I am passionate, I've prepared for it, and I'm not scared of the scale of it. So these things are what goes inside you, and they show up. Those things kind of show up. So I would say these kind of things matter a lot in the first sort of half of it. And once you are on the journey, then you start thinking about the first thing, obviously, one step at a time, because it's a massive. If you started SourceWiz, for example, there must be a vision, there must be a goal, and I'm sure that must be a very, very, important and large goal. You guys are all very, very bright people, very, very accomplished people. So those kind of things. So one step at a time. Only today you are recording this podcast. So tomorrow you might be recording somebody else, and then doing so many other things. So one step at a time is a very important thing which all of us know about. But when it comes to practicing that thing in real life business, sometimes we begin to lose patience. Sometimes we want to go up in leaps and bounds. Can happen once in a while, but that's not to be expected. So your ability to believe absolutely unshakably that one step at a time will get me where I want to be, and I'm not going to be discouraged by the slow pace of progress in certain patches. I'm not going to be discouraged by extremely threatening circumstances in certain areas, but I'll just keep walking and walking and climbing and climbing and climbing. Whatever best I can do, I'll keep doing it. And eventually, you do come out, on top of things. So I would say that these three, four things, I can keep on talking about the rest of it, but let me give you a chance to respond to what I've already said, and then I'll talk about the other three lessons.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, it's really inspiring to see, I mean, I wouldn't really, I mean, I don't know if you do recommend this to business folks out there to go and scale up Everest. I'm sure you've done that to a couple of your friends. But metaphorically speaking, I think it's very important for every individual to identify, or every business to kind of identify their Everest in some way, right? So that process of identification, that process of reflections, easily, I think, if you take any example today, we get fogged up very easily. And to kind of, again, metaphorically speaking, when you do go to Mount Everest, there's a lot of things covering it up, and then sometimes views open up, sometimes they kind of, are hidden in some way.
But what is important is that you only need to see the next step where you have to really put your foot. You don't have to look at the whole thing in one shot. I mean, you should know where you're going. So, that power of focus, when you talk about focus, it is about focusing on the next step, but also on the bigger picture. So it takes both kinds of focuses to sort of, get your act together, and make sure that each step you're taking is actually towards the same purpose. So yeah, you're right, that there are these parts which are not so visible all the time, and they need not be. They need not be. It's not necessary to be, everything to be completely in clear sight. So sometimes it's also inside you.
Mhm. But how does one go about identifying their Everest? Like, is it? I mean, of course, you can have a wish and you can have a goal, right? Like, how do you differentiate the both, and how do?
See, I think enough of wise people have talked about differentiating between a wish and a goal, because if it is a goal, there has to be a plan, there has to be a time and action calendar, there has to be a consistency of effort. A wish is something you wish, and then you leave it for somehow the universe to accomplish it for you. But a goal is something which you make the effort. Goal don't come to real life just by themselves. Your mom doesn't achieve your goals, but your mom can grant a few wishes for you. So that difference is quite obvious. But let me also take you to the next three steps, and then we can talk about all the seven lessons, because this is something which I really feel has a lot of parallels, and I would definitely use my experience here to be able to share this with anybody who wants to listen, because I'm sure that it is so relevant to everyone. It's not about climbing the mountain. This is not about mountaineering. This is about what you learn from mountaineering, which is relevant for everyday life, and even more so your work life, and even more so if you happen to be an entrepreneur. So after the first 4 months, then I want to talk about something which is very intrinsic, which is very critical to be able to really complete an expedition, which is about how do you handle your fears, how do you handle the threats that are there. You don't handle threats by being overconfident, by being dismissive of them, to say, oh kuch nahi hai, main to chढ़ जाऊंगा ऐसे कुछ नहीं है, देखा जाएगा. What the hell do you even mean देखा जाएगा what? क्या देखोगे आप? So there's nothing to be देखा जाएगा. Everything has to be prepared. Okay, some of it will still have to be देखा जाएगा, but a lot of the threats. So that risk part is divided on this journey and in journey of life into two broad baskets where I have analyzed them. One is the known risks, and then there is the unknown unknowns. Right. So on a expedition like Everest, everything can't be pre-planned. Everything cannot be already be told to you. ये ऐसे ऐसे होगा, then you can do this, and this is the sort of algorithm to go and climb. No, but a lot of it is. So in any big project, in any complicated goal, if there are some known threats and known risks, so those are the risks where I felt, I coined the term saying make friends with your fears. When we say make friends with your fears, what do we really mean? We mean that we get comfortable with the fears. We don't want to ignore them, but at the same time, we don't want to be scared of them. But we want to respect the fact that these are real threats. These are things to be scared of, to be afraid of, and therefore now they must be prepared for. So if the fears are helping us with a robust approach to preparation, they are a good thing to have. We drive well because we don't want to have an accident. If you're not afraid of an accident, if you're not afraid of bad health, if you're not afraid of certain things, the world would be much more chaotic. And we know those examples in lives also, right? So that is the part of the known part of the risks that you prepare for them. On Everest, for example, what happens if oxygen runs out? What happens if you really fall off? There are so many other things, how to deal with frostbites, how to deal with certain things. Those are training issues. Those are mental and physical preparation issues. The next basket of risk is the unexpected things that will happen during the course of the whole expedition. Things which may or may not, but you don't know about them. When will they come? What will happen? What has to be done? So that has to be done on the spur of the moment. So that lesson I coined it, and I absorbed it as using the phrase expect to deal with the unexpected. So there is a element of unexpected stuff, but if you let it remain unexpected completely, then when it happens, you can have so many other forces acting upon you. There can be so many other things that are going wrong at the same time. And then additionally, something massive also falls on your head. And if you are completely not prepared for it emotionally, if you're not thinking that something like that can happen, then it can take you down. But what am I saying? I am saying that if you expect that certain things will go wrong unexpectedly, when will they go wrong? What will happen? You can't say. But in the big picture, we know कुछ ना कुछ तो गड़बड़ होगा, कुछ ना कुछ कभी भी हो सकता है. ये game है, it's like war. Something can happen. There can be a landmine. There can be something else. So many. When those things happen, actually turn out to be happening, and in your heart of hearts, you were expecting some things to happen unexpectedly. Then when they happen, then you focus on fighting the battle and not getting distracted, not getting disheartened, not getting demoralized. You don't collapse under the attack from unexpected risks, because you already knew kuch na kuch to aayega. Okay, ye aaya, now let's fight with this. So your energies and your focus is not wasted in thinking, why did this happen? It shouldn't have happened. The whole world is against me. God is not supporting me. Whoever is not supporting me, that's bullshit. You are doing something which is critical enough, which is risky enough. Something will happen. Otherwise, everybody can do it. No? There is no reward for doing easy stuff. So those are the two major, blocks, and and if you think about it, it covers all kinds of risks. So there's the known, and then there's the unknown. And if you're covered with both, then you are covered with both, and then you can handle both. So you are believing in one step at a time. You're not scared of the scale. You prepared well. You are focused on what has to be done. You are friendly with your fears, so you're comfortable with threats happening right in your face, and you're dealing with them on a step-by-step basis. And you are also able to deal with things which go wrong. So when you said anecdotes, for example, we are climbing the Kumbu ice fall, at night the first time, and all of a sudden my left foot went through the floor into the water below. So I'm like one foot on ice and one foot into the water, and soaked. My whole leg was soaked in water, in ice cold water, and it's minus 25 outside. So eventually, what are you supposed to do? Now you can't be climbing up because it's too cold. You will get frostbites. You will have ice formed inside your clothes. So you have to go back. But you can't be demoralized because of such things. When we were climbing near the summit, Camp 4, just the day before the final summit push, my oxygen ran out. And all of a sudden I was like, why has it become so difficult for me to take every step? And then I looked up in the pressure gauge, there was no oxygen in the tank. And my Sherpa had already gone to camp, so then I kept trying to move, but then eventually they said, it's better that you sort of wait for somebody to bring you the oxygen. And there was a spot where you could. So those kind of things happen on the way back. I mean, the last day our guide didn't go with us. Our main guide disappeared. So that was a major unexpected setback. But now you already prepared. You've done this for the last 45 days, 50 days. Last minute your guide is gone for the last most critical moment. What do you want to do? You want to give up now? Just because the guide left? Eventually, the guide is just there. You have to climb your own mountain. चढ़ाई तो आपने खुद ही करना है. There is nobody else. He's not going to climb it for you. He's just going to be there for you, but eventually everything has to be done on your own. So when you start not getting flabbergasted completely, or not getting completely, blown away from these kind of threats, you begin to, attack the problem for what it is, and without enlarging the scope of the problem unnecessarily. So between these, 6 lessons, everything else works out. And then the last thing, which is very critical in life and is taught by Mt.Everest in a very, very ruthless manner, is what I coined the term time is oxygen. So on Mt.Everest, everybody has only the number of cylinders that you have. And if you're not done with the job within the cylinders, then you're screwed, basically. So it is consequential discipline. No explanation is called for. No excuses are asked for. You have it or you don't have it. So basically, every time when you leave Camp 4, the last night, you have 3 cylinders. You have to do the job within the 3 and come back. If you are not moving fast enough, if you're not moving at all, and you're whiling away your time, or you're resting too much, and oxygen is flowing through the tank all the time. So at some point it will get over, and your return to camp may as well be before the oxygen gets over. Similarly, in life and in entrepreneurship, there is the concept of time. Time is continuously, whether or not we are being productive, whatever we are doing, not doing. So time is continuously passing by, and that parallel is very critical. In many day-to-day situations, we don't realize the criticality of it. We realize the criticality of this only when we take a helicopter view, 30 years later in life, to say, oh, this was not a good way to have spent my time at that time. But then it's too late. It's too late. So that is an encompassing lesson, whether you're a student, whether you're a professional, whether you're whoever. Time is the most limited resource, and is also the most important differentiator between who does what in life. besides of all the other, everything else being equal, what you do with your time is what matters at the end of the day. So these 7 lessons, and they have, every single thing has a lot of relevance to everyone's life, no matter who you are, but a lot more relevance if you are a business person.
Got it. So, as much as I am tempted to keep going on this conversation about Everest and everything around it, I think it's. I think we can probably take a flying carpet from the summit down to base camp and talk about carpets and rugs, which is primarily the business that you are
Sure.
in. Uh, Coming to the business, Sharda Exports. So, could you just tell us a little bit more about the business and how it's grown over the years, and then we could go about and talk in terms of the global trade environment when it comes to rugs and carpets.
So Sharda Exports is essentially a manufacturing and design company which does product for the best brands in the world. And as I said, it's grown organically, starting from nothing. If we are not in a carpet producing area, this was not a generational business or something. But that also came with the advantage of being able to look at everything in a very, very independent, objective manner, without any baggage of traditions. So sometimes those things, so we could that way combine the best of both worlds with traditional artisanal manufacturing techniques and manufacturing of product, but modern management thinking, more updated marketing approach, more updated thoughts about what, like how to build your business, in terms of just brand building. And therefore in 2013-14 we launched our own brand called the Rug Republic. So that was, then it became two sort of verticals in the business, where was one was OEM sort of thing, and the other one was the brand, the Rug Republic. And the brand was not only a branding exercise, but also was trying to solve other problems of typical supply chain issues, like minimum quantities, like lead times. So we did not have any minimums here. We had stuff in stock, so therefore the lead time was much more compressed. The trade fairs have been our biggest tool, and also the buying offices, and also obviously one-on-one effort by traveling to clients. Walking the street, as you say, you have to be out there. This, as I said, is a very brick and mortar kind of world, and if you are addressing a lot of other home fashion and home decor people, there is, everybody's pretty much in the same boat. Yes, things are beginning to evolve a little bit on the e-com side, and but there also, there isn't an exponential, suddenly something becomes very popular and you have some massive unimaginable growth curve. So this is in many ways something which catches on step by step. And trade shows in the B2B space are one of the important vehicles, especially till before COVID actually struck. And after that, also once we realized that without trade shows for 2-3 years, things went on quite okay. But now everything is back with a bang, and people are sort of back to the trade shows, because eventually it is something which you touch and feel, and you're selling a physical product. So decision making regarding buying and selling of that on the trade side is also most comfortably done in the physical space, because eventually somebody will take a rug home, somebody will take a piece of furniture home, and they will physically use it, they will interact with it, and they will see how comfortable it is, they will see how it feels on the texture, all of those kind of things. So I would say that all of the home fashion and home decor articles, the business growth is design led, and the stability is quality and supply, what should I say, supply security. Will you deliver on time? Will you package it right? Will you follow the instructions? Will you do stuff that has to be done, which is not something that you know uh, nobody can take a chance on it. It's a given. But if you can't get those things right, then there is also a problem in growing, and especially if you're working with larger brands, there's very little tolerance to these kind of mistakes. In terms of the global business environment, as you asked me, I think the home fashion business actually, ironically and counterintuitively, went up during the COVID years. So we all benefited from the fact that people were staying home, that people were not spending money on other things. So even though there was an income suppression, but let's say by and large, we can agree that the socioeconomic class which suffered the most economically isn't really the main class that consumes home fashion products. So home decor and home fashion articles, somewhere from the middle to upper middle to higher socioeconomic strata, and those strata were not so badly affected because of COVID. In fact, they had extra money because they were not traveling, they were not socializing, they were not eating in restaurant, they were not buying new clothes, they were not taking more flights, and they were not staying in hotels. So that business did see an extra wave during that time, which is now subsiding. So most companies, if not all, are down 20-25% in 2023 as compared to 2022-23 as compared to, let's say, 21-22. To me, that has to be accepted, as something good which happened in the 2 years. Is not something bad that is happening now. So people are getting sort of back to the pre-COVID levels. So I would not necessarily think of it as something which is terrible, or if it's a negative growth. It's not negative growth, we just had a bump in between. So right now I don't see anything terrible about the work, about the world environment. Yes, interest rates are definitely affecting how people think, but I should be forgiven to think that, again, for the same reason just now, as I said just now, these are not items which should be so deeply affected, just because nobody buys a rug if they still have to worry about interest rates. So these are not things which are necessary consumption articles. But yes, on an overall basis, the fact is that people are needing to spend more money on their homes and cars than anything that they have installments to pay on. So therefore, the spare money that they had to spend on other stuff has reduced. So far, we are seeing a little bit of dip in demand, but that's also to do with not so much dip in demand at the retail level, but also the fact that the buyers had mostly projected optimistic numbers based on the sales of 2021 and 22, and people seem to be overstocked, and then they want to clear off their inventory. So that's the global environment according to me right now. Nothing alarming, and I do anticipate that with this whole interest rate, and if there is some other problem like a massive stock market collapse or banking collapse, then yes, otherwise we should be fine.
Understood. Understood. So, since we are on the topic of trade fairs, and of course, COVID has taught us a lot of lessons, and now I think the world's open up a lot more, and people are attending trade fairs around the world. So, on trade fairs, since you've been doing this back from 1992 till about now, and you will be doing a lot more in the future. So, how has it changed? How has the landscape of trade fairs changed, and how do you get that formula right? How do you take part in a trade fair and come back in a positive with respect to your orders and things around the trade fair?
So two parts to that, Gagan. One is the heart of it hasn't really changed. Still the physical format. You go, people walk around, they see your booths, they walk in, they talk to you, all of those things. The expectations, however, have changed in terms of just how nice your booth has to be, just how nice your product has to be, how perfect your labeling, packaging, your ability to have a very thorough conversation then and there. You should not be like looking like you're tentative on it. Everything you ask, you say, I'll get back to you on this. I'm shocked. And even today, when I also travel to the fair as a buyer because of our retail business and our projects that we do on the construction side, a lot of people, they don't have pricing. I mean, I find it ridiculous. You're in a trade show, you don't have pricing. Like, you will get back to me later with the pricing. Then what am I supposed to do with you here? So sometimes I would say that everybody should be prepared as much as they can to answer every possible question. Ideally on the label itself, so people can read it for themselves, and there is obviously a credibility to the written word. Plus, in the middle of conversations, if there are many people attending to something, it reduces the possibility of mistakes, different people saying different things, or somebody making a mistake, somebody else thinking of something else. So that comprehensiveness of information, the class and beauty of your presentation, these things always have been important, but even more important now because the general standard of these things has gone up a lot. So let's say a booth that could get us a best booth award in 2010 will not get us today because the average styling of a booth has gone up a lot. So in that sense, there is that change. The other change, which is not such a happy change from the perspective of a business person today, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we used to get on the spot orders in trade fairs. People used to look at the product, they liked it, they say, okay, here are my numbers. Today, a very, very few people do on the spot orders. Most people want to go back, they want to compare things because presentations are higher quality, you get them quickly, you get those PDFs, you put everything in an Excel sheet, you compare different vendors. So the process, the cycle of looking at a product to ordering a product has become longer. There is a lot more product comparison, there is a lot more cost comparison, which was not so prevalent 20 years ago, 15 years ago, because a people did not have that many qualified vendor choices. B, there wasn't the technology to quickly get something on a WhatsApp picture here, like you've seen it in the factory now. The next second it's with your buyer. You can have a video call. You can have all of those things. Those things didn't work. So you have to send a sample. Wait for him references. So that is another big change. I have to say that So therefore, when somebody is trying to develop a business now, you have to be patient with the whole trade show model. I would say do the best you can. Don't try to save money on booth design or product design, stuff like that. Other than that, it's just a question of how you come across. Personalities do matter. Who is talking to the client also matters because he has to take a decision or make an impression about you in 20 seconds. So being well dressed, well turned out, there has to be attention to detail. To don't think that my product is a hero, everything else will take care of itself. No, if your product is a hero, you're even more obliged to make sure that nothing else is out of place. So even though that's a necessary condition, but having good product and good design is not a sufficient condition for success in the trade shows or otherwise in business for that matter. So that is also one thinking which really has to change, from one generation to the other. A lot of other stuff matters a lot more today than it used to in the past.
We've put together a rapid fire question. It will not take you more than a minute to answer them. We've particularly curated this for you, and we'd like to hear
Okay,
your thoughts on this. Okay, so
I'll do my best.
yeah. So when it comes to rugs, is it wool or synthetic fibers?
Wool, no, hands down.
Hand tufted or hand knotted?
Hand knotted is the real thing, but hand tufted has been my bread and butter. So
Okay. Shag or low pile?
low pile always healthier, long lasting,
Okay.
timeless.
Geometric patterns or floral designs?
It depends on the overall project. Classical patterns are always again timeless. Contemporary homes or spaces need geometric. So I would not necessarily have. This is not an either or. This is about like whatever works. And I like both kinds, to be honest. I have both kinds of homes. I have both kinds of projects. There is no one way or the other for me in this one. I'm sorry.
Okay. Indoor or outdoor use?
Well, indoor. I don't know if outdoor rugs really is. If you're sitting outdoor, why do you need a rug? Enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the floor, enjoy the grass, the stone, whatever it is.
Okay. Neutral colors or bold colors?
Neutral for me.
Rectangular or round shape?
Rectangular.
Okay. And why?
No, it just is more functional. It goes with the furniture alignment, it is just the right thing. You can have circular rugs as accent rugs here and there. But as such, in a space along with a bed or with a sofa setting, with a coffee table, just a lot more functional.
Okay. Got it. Fringed or fringeless?
fringeless, less messy, cleaner, clean lines, uncluttered.
Mhm. Got it. Thank you so much. I think that did pretty well there, and you kind of shared your tastes as well.
But you made it too easy. You just have product related questions. So that was very
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, I mean, if you look at your business particularly, I think you're at the crossroads of one. It's a very touch and feel. It's a very handmade kind of an approach to creation of rugs, and on the other hand, you're looking at scale as well. So, how do you balance creativity on one side and to be able to scale it to be able to supply to the demands of the world on the other side? So,
So I wouldn't call it a balance. It's a question of managing creativity at scale. There are no counter forces. These are aligned forces, and they have to be aligned in a way in which you are still in a comfort zone while you scale up. Because without creativity, at least the home fashion business, you have no role to play unless you are only a very mass production oriented player selling only to big box stores who also actually do need creativity, but for individual styles they can probably do a lot more dollars, so they don't want as many new things as, let's say, a more specialty store would need. But there is no dichotomy between being creative or being scaled up. You have to be a little bit of both, and the more comfortable you are with scale without compromising creativity, the better the chances are that you can create a larger business with healthy margins. Because sometimes you can create a very high top line business but with a very shaky bottom line, because you have been competing on price, you have been whittling down quality in order to meet those price targets, your design work hasn't been of a caliber where somebody would be encouraged to pay a higher price for a product, and so on. So these two things have to be kept in mind. I feel that there is a trade-off between creativity and pricing, but there is no trade-off between creativity and scale. You have to do those things, but if you're creative and good quality, you can possibly command better prices.
understood. So, I mean, if we have to look at the other angle of people, right? So, a business like yours, I'm sure, is very people centric. So, how do you, ensure that the people are doing what they're supposed to be doing all the time and consistently to be able to do that and deliver from time to time?
So in fact, I have just finished writing another book on that subject about managing small businesses, and it's a very important thing. And we should have talked of it earlier. We're almost out of time now, I guess. But yes, it is a very critical piece about how do people align, and it's about not only doing and knowing the right thing, but also dependably doing the right thing repeatedly all the time. So there is, especially in these kind of businesses, an element of rigor and discipline which has to be there. That discipline in our case is brought about by not only monitoring what's happening, but also a lot of detailed incentive structures which are rewarding consistency, which are rewarding process fidelity. Okay, so that is one thing. We are proudly pretty much the only company in the trade, I think, to be a great place to work certified business. We are also a great place to work, top 25 in the country for building a culture of innovation by all. So we go to great lengths in order to make sure that on the one hand, people feel good about it. It's not only, because the business scale is not small enough that somebody can just monitor it personally, or the entrepreneur can just be on top of everything. So that effort has to be distributed and accepted as a responsibility by hundreds of people. So therefore process alignment becomes important. Therefore an incentive and a sort of a data gathering system about how things are being done, what is the result of what. So we do have a very comprehensive system of data points that we gather, because objectivity is important. When you want to convince somebody about something, it's not about like your word against mine. If it is data based, then it's much easier. That battle is at least not not extended. Other than that, I think it is again like brushing your teeth, man. You need to do it every day. So there isn't a pill that you can, one you hire a consultant and he gives you some templates and Excel sheets and you think that's going to do your job. No, I'm sorry, the world is not that simple, you know. So expect to deal with the unexpected, as we said from Everest. Expect to deal with the fact that there can be exits. Sometimes you are very well trained people leave for whatever reason. So if it is individual dependent versus process dependent, very often you keep seeing that you make some progress and then you fall back, and you make some progress and you fall back, because individuals, even though fortunately, at least for us, and I know for many good companies, the senior team and team leaders tend to be more stable, but less and less so. And especially the second and the third layers are even more unstable. So therefore, the team leaders also have to be given the structures and the management structures to be able to deal with those, employee turnover, client turnover. So it is about data-based incentives. It is about rigorous process building, which are thinned down to the simplest form that can be effective. It's not about getting complexity in place. It's actually about getting simplicity in place somehow. And a lot of complexity can be reduced by using templates, by using certain, processes where things just go step by step, as we said, one step at a time, without saying, oh, we have to make a great carpet. Well, making a great carpet starts with incoming material check, then the issue, then the first stage check, second stage check. So it's all step by step, one step at a time. Basically, that's how I feel it works out eventually.
Okay, got it. So this is something that we usually ask everybody on barriers to break towards the end, and I just wanted to also ask you this particular question. It's not really a question of sorts, but an experience that you would like to share with the audience. Like, is there an experience that you felt like, this is probably the kindest thing that has ever happened to me while I was working in this industry? So, any anecdotes and
Kindest.
yeah, kindest experience that you've had in the industry?
Okay, I have to get thinking for that one, because there are so many kind experiences that it's hard to say which one is the kindest. You know, so there are some things which are very luck based. There are some things which are look, to be very frank with you. There it's a unforgiving. Every business today, in that sense, is very unforgiving. If something has gone wrong, then down the chain, the clients of our clients will not forgive them. They will not accept it. So the client cannot accept it from you. So therefore, you can't accept it from your supplier either. So kindness in terms of just being forgiven for not doing your job right, I don't think that is even the right expectation or the right word. But kindness in terms of opportunities that get thrown towards you, and that if you have it in you, then you can sort of capitalize on those opportunities. Kindness in terms of when things go wrong, even though you are accountable, but are you given a little bit more of elbow room to handle that accountability, to give you more time to sort of pay up certain dues that must be done. So those kind of things I think happen, and they're also based on reputation, because when you know that supplier, or if my customer knows that we almost always do things right, so once in a while when some things go wrong, then we don't get suddenly fired for it. But yeah, we have to stand accountable. So if you ask for me an anecdote, I would say about much earlier, maybe 20, 15 to 20 years ago, we had a massive rejection in Germany. One of our large catalog companies was doing a very successful article, and they did some tests, random pick test from the warehouse. And there is a banned chemical in Germany, PCP, pentachlorophenol, which is basically considered to be carcinogenic. And 5 parts per million is allowed, and some products tested 5.4 parts per million. And because it's a destructive test, you can't test individual drugs to say which one is which one is okay, which one is not. There were different test results from different items, so they had to say that we cannot sell all the. So they had 2,200 of those articles in stock, full size big rugs. We are a small company, values of those items running into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they said that, Aditya, we cannot sell this just by law, and we have to actually cover it in our warehouse, and you need to pick it up from here. And obviously we need our money back. So we were a much smaller company, and and it was not so simple for me to suddenly pay a couple of $100,000. But they gave me some months. They did not discontinue business with me. In fact, that client is our client from 1995 till today, one of our longest time standing clients. And I think some of these incidents, when things go wrong in a big way and you show the commitment to fixing it, and you rise up to the occasion to fix those things, even if it is costing you a lot of money and it's causing you losses, that really cements the relationship to a point where you've proven that you will stand behind your product and you will not shirk away from responsibility, even if it is a very difficult patch. But they gave us about 6 months to pay up, and within the 6 months, we were able to sell the product to some other country where that requirement was not so stringent. But let's say if they did not give us the 6 months and they really threw the product out, or they said that if you can't pay us by next month, we'll have to stop business with you, etc., etc. They didn't do that, and I think that was kind. Maybe that was also necessary, because where would I pay it from immediately? But there are these kind of things that happen, in a long journey like this. There are things that happen even from employees. I think there are some many incidents where your senior people, your employees have done things which are way beyond the call of their duty. I have to say that that is also a form of kindness, which is not always so common, especially now. You know, so yeah, we've been blessed with our fair share of kind incidents from both from employees and from customers.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's a lot to learn from whatever you just stated. I mean, you don't have to experience kindness in a way that we know of, but there could be different instances from where all of this kind of adds up. And like you mentioned, people stick with you.
A lot of time keeping you
Yeah,
going. you know. Thank you, Gagan. Nice talking to you, and I hope that whatever I shared will be of some use to your
yeah.
listeners. And all the best for SourceWiz. You're doing something very good for the industry. I appreciate that, and we want more and more of such advancements in how we work, how industry works. So good luck to you guys.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I mean, it was really inspirational talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing whatever you did today.
All the best to
Thank
you.
you.
Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.